Every year, on the same night in early spring, the people of Ledford Hollow, Arkansas, climb their ladders and nail their windows shut. Not lock them, nail them. Boards over the glass, iron nails driven into the frame, and in the oldest houses, thin strips of lead pressed into the gap where the sash meets the sill. They seal the upper windows too, the second-story ones nobody could reach from the ground. Ledford Hollow has fewer than 400 residents. It sits in a fold of the Ozarks where the county roads stop matching the map. And when you ask them why they do it, every single one of them gives you the same answer, almost word for word, like they rehearsed it as children. However, the real reason is not printed in any tourism brochure. It is written into a county order from 1889, an order the state of Arkansas says never existed. And before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I'm about to tell you gets significantly darker, and I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete reconstruction of the town's deleted founding record, the survey map that shows the older settlement beneath this one, the sealed county order that started the window law, and the names and dates of the 7 men who signed it, I put it all into a written document. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now let's continue. To understand Ledford Hollow, you have to understand what it looks like on an ordinary day, because on an ordinary day it looks like nothing at all. A gas station, a feed store, a white clapboard church with a steeple that leans about 4 degrees to the east and has leaned that way for as long as anyone can photograph. The town sits in a low bowl of land ringed by limestone bluffs, and a creek runs through the middle of it that the locals call the 9 Mile, even though it is nowhere near 9 miles long. Nobody can tell you where the name came from. That is a pattern here. The names are older than the memories attached to them. Most of the houses date to the late 1800s, which is what you would expect for an Ozark town, but a few of the foundations do not. Down by the creek, under 3 of the oldest homes, there is stonework that does not match anything the settlers were building. Precise, mortarless, fitted stone, the kind of work that takes specialized tools and specialized knowledge. When a University of Arkansas survey team came through in the 1970s to catalog historic structures, they noted these foundations, photographed them, and then, in the final report, described them as, quote, likely repurposed from an earlier structure of unknown origin. Unknown origin. In a town that supposedly did not exist before 1848. The window ritual happens on the 9th of March. Always the 9th. It does not move for weekends. It does not move for weather. It does not move for anything. In the days before, the hardware store, which is really just one corner of the feed store, sells out of nails. Not just any nails. Cut nails. The old square kind, which the owner special orders every February because the townspeople will not use modern wire nails for this. When a reporter from Little Rock asked why the old nails mattered, an elderly woman told him the new ones, quote, don't hold what needs holding. Then she refused to say anything else. Here is the official explanation, the one they give tourists, and the one they gave that reporter. They say it is a tradition tied to a tornado. In March of 1889, the story goes, a devastating storm swept through the valley, shattered every window in town, and killed a number of residents. So every year, the town symbolically boards its windows to remember the dead and to remind themselves to prepare. It is a clean story. It is the kind of story that ends a conversation. And it is almost certainly a cover for something else, because when you go looking for that tornado, you cannot find it. There is no record of a major tornado in that part of Arkansas in March of 1889. Not in the National Weather Service historical database. Not in the newspapers of the surrounding counties, which reported on far smaller storms that same season. Not in the state climatological records. A killer tornado that leveled a town would have made the papers in Little Rock, in Fort Smith, in Fayetteville. It made none of them. The storm that supposedly started the most important tradition in Ledford Hollow left no trace anywhere except in the mouths of the people who repeat it. And that is the first crack in the whole thing, because there is a record from March of 1889, just not the one they tell you about. In the Boone County archives, filed among land transfers and livestock disputes, there is a photostat of a county order dated the 7th of March, 1889. 2 days before the 9th. The order is titled, "In the Clerk's Own Hand, a resolution concerning the securing of dwellings against the passage." Against the passage. Not against the storm, not against the wind. Against the passage. The document is water damaged and parts of it are illegible, but the parts you can read do not describe weather. They describe a schedule, a recurring event, something the council knew was coming back. Before we move on to the next record, stop for a second. What you just heard about the sealed 1889 order is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the original county ledger, the exact date, the 7 signatures. It's all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back, because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. QR code is on your screen. Now, to make sense of what the council was securing their homes against, we have to go underneath the town, literally underneath it, because the mortarless stone foundations by the creek are not the only thing down there. In 1931, during the Depression, a WPA crew was sent to Ledford Hollow to shore up the creek bank and prevent flooding. Digging along the 9 Mile, about 11 feet down, they hit a wall. Not a natural rock formation, a wall. Dressed stone, running in a straight line, with what one worker described in a letter home as, quote, "windows in it, filled up solid with river mud, windows, 11 feet underground, in a wall that predated the town by no one knows how long." The WPA project was quietly cancelled 3 weeks later. The official reason given was budget reallocation. The crew was reassigned to a road project 2 counties over, and the trench they dug was backfilled and never reopened. The letter describing the buried wall survived only because the worker who wrote it kept a copy, and his granddaughter donated his papers to a historical society in the 1990s, where they sat unread for another 20 years. This is the pattern that people in the Tartaria research community keep running into: a discovery that contradicts the accepted timeline, a sudden cancellation, a backfill, and a silence that lasts exactly as long as everyone who saw it stays alive. Because here is what the mainstream explanation of American history cannot account for. If Ledford Hollow was founded in 1848 by settlers moving west, who built the mortarless stone foundations? Who built a wall with windows 11 feet below the current ground level? Ground level does not rise 11 feet in a couple of centuries through natural sediment, not in a creek valley like this one. It rises that fast when something buries it, when a flood of mud and debris comes down all at once and swallows a landscape whole. The people who study this call it the mud flood, an event, or a series of events, that buried an older, more advanced civilization and left the survivors to rebuild on top of the graves without ever fully understanding what they were standing on. And the older civilization has a name that keeps surfacing in the records of towns like this one: Tartaria. A word that appears on hundreds of maps printed before 1800, describing an enormous empire across the northern hemisphere, and then vanishes almost completely from the maps printed after. An entire civilization, present on the maps of one century and erased from the maps of the next, as if someone went through and quietly removed it. The buildings it left behind got reassigned. The fairs and expositions of the 1800s, the ones with the impossible white cities that were, we are told, built in months out of temporary plaster and then demolished, those white cities look exactly like what a mudflood survivor would have found half buried and cleaned off. Ledford Hollow, according to the people who have dug into its founding record, sits on top of one of these buried sites, and the wall with the windows is not a foundation, it is the top of a structure. The town is built on the roof of something older, which brings us back to the 9th of March, and to the one question that the tornado story exists to stop you from asking. If they are not boarding their windows against a storm, then what comes through the windows on that night? The accounts are consistent, and they are old. Not internet old, handwritten diary old. There is a journal, held privately by a Ledford family, that a researcher was allowed to photograph a single page of. The page describes the night of the 9th in the writer's childhood, sometime in the 1910s. The writer describes lying in bed as a boy and hearing what he called the returning, a sound from underneath the house, from the direction of the creek, that started low and rose through the night. He describes his father sitting at the top of the stairs with a lantern and a hammer facing the sealed upper window until dawn. And he describes one detail that he says he never forgot, that the boarded window from the inside was warm to the touch. In March, in the Ozarks, warm. What could make a second-story window warm from the outside on a freezing March night in a valley with no source of heat below it? The Tartarian answer is uncomfortable, and it is the reason this story has spread. The old structures were not empty. Whatever powered them, whatever the mud flood interrupted rather than ended, still runs on a cycle. And the 9th of March is when that cycle reaches the surface. The town does not board its windows to keep out the wind. It boards them to keep from seeing what the wall with the windows sees on the one night it wakes up. Skeptics have obvious responses, and it is worth taking them seriously, because a story this strange invites a lot of lazy belief. A folklorist from a state university spent 2 summers in Ledford Hollow and wrote a paper arguing that the whole thing is a classic isolated community ritual. The tornado, real or not, becomes a founding myth. The nails and the boards become a bonding ritual that reinforces group identity in a place cut off from the outside world. The warm window is a child's memory distorted by fear and decades of retelling. On its own terms, that explanation is reasonable. It explains the behavior without requiring a buried empire. What it does not explain is the wall. It does not explain the mortarless foundations that a state survey team called an earlier structure of unknown origin. It does not explain why a county order dated 2 days before the ritual describes securing dwellings against the passage instead of against a storm. It does not explain why the WPA trench was backfilled and the project cancelled within 3 weeks of hitting dressed stone with windows in it 11 feet down. A ritual theory explains the people. It does not explain the ground they are standing on. And every time someone tries to dig into that ground, the digging stops, which is the part that should bother you the most. Because if there were nothing under Ledford Hollow, there would be nothing to hide. You do not backfill an empty trench and reassign the crew 2 counties over because you found ordinary river rock. You do not file a county order under securing against the passage and then invent a tornado that the Weather Service has no record of. The cover story is the proof. When the official explanation for something requires an event that provably did not happen, the official explanation is not there to inform you. It is there to close the conversation before it reaches the wall. There is one more detail in the 1889 order that the town does not discuss, and it is the reason so many people who find this story cannot let it go. At the bottom of the water-damaged page, beneath the resolution concerning the securing of dwellings, there are 7 signatures, 7 men of the council, dated the same day. 6 of the names match headstones in the Ledford Hollow Cemetery, ordinary men, a pair of farmers, and a blacksmith, and the town's first postmaster. The 7th name does not. It appears on no census, no land deed, no grave in the county. It is written in a different hand from the rest, an older style of lettering, and beside it, where the other 6 wrote their occupations, this one wrote a single word the archivist could not translate, and that matches no English of the period. Whoever the 7th signer was, he put his name to the law that seals the town every March, and then he left no trace that he ever lived. The people who study Ledford Hollow believe he was not there to represent the town at all. They believe he was there to represent whatever the town was securing itself against, and that the order everyone calls a resolution was never a decision the council made on its own. It was a treaty. Today, Ledford Hollow does what it has always done. The feed store special orders the square-cut nails every February. The families climb their ladders every 9th of March and seal the glass, upper windows and all, and they sit up through the night the way their grandparents did, facing the boards, waiting for the returning to pass and the ground to go quiet again. They will tell you it is about a tornado. They will tell you it is tradition. And a few of them, the older ones, if you catch them alone and you have earned it, will tell you the truth in the same flat voice that woman used on the reporter. The new nails don't hold what needs holding. Then they will change the subject and you will not get another word. The buried wall is still down there under the 9 Mile, 11 feet below a town that insists it was founded on empty land. The windows in that wall are still packed with mud, and no one has ever once tried to dig one of them out. And every year, on the 9th of March, The people who live on top of it board up their own windows and wait for something the maps stopped admitting exists 200 years ago. If you want to go deeper on the erased empire under towns exactly like this one, and see the pattern repeat across a dozen more of them, the next video is on your screen right now. Watch it before it gets buried too.